Death Note one-shot manga released and seemed to have gained a lot of attention. It was trending on Twitter and everyone seemed genuinely excited to get some new Death Note content. I know I was excited. Death Note goes down as one of the greatest animes I've ever seen, and it's definitely within my top 5 favorites of all time. So Ryuk gets the notebook back and decides to head back to Earth because he wants more apples and he's simply bored and wants to be entertained. Ryuk decides to pick a boy named Minoru Tanaka, who has incredible intellect, scoring the highest grade on the intelligence test 3 years in a row. They make a reference that he might be the smartest middle school student in all of Japan, despite his actual school grades being pretty low. Tanaka learns everything about the notebook and how it works. He understood how Light Yagami was able to do everything he accomplished. The thing I loved most about the series was just how intelligent the writing was. You see Tanaka learning how Light figured out how to use all of the book's rules to his advantage. He recognizes that Light was a genius, but also some of his strategies wouldn't work in today's world because cameras exist everywhere and police have gotten more sophisticated at investigating cybercrimes. You see Tanaka weighing out his options with Ryuk and deciding on the best course of action if he should use the book or not. He then chooses to return the Death Note back to Ryuk and tells him to come back in 2 years, and when Ryuk returns, our poor Ryuk went without apples that entire time. We now know Tanaka's plan is to sell the notebook, and he was getting Ryuk to do all the work for him. He put the book up for auction on national TV and had Ryuk travel underground to the studio and hold the signs up in front of the camera. Everyone saw a floating sign because they simply can't see Ryuk. Tanaka never had to leave the house, never has to go outside, and simply lives his life as he normally would. Ryuk simply did all the work, and so none of it could go back to Tanaka. The bidding war started on Twitter, #PowerOfKira. I already made my bid. The bidding war was just insane, rising to millions of dollars in no time. And this is when we get to see Nate River, who you will remember as the new L from the original anime, and replace the L that was killed by Light. He's trying to problem solve who the new owner of the book is, and he refers to him as Akira. He thinks the only way to find this person would be to follow Ryuk, but he realizes he's traveling underground, and therefore it's impossible to find Akira. Or is it Akira? Akira. He decides to put his focus on who the book was going to be sold to instead. Not gonna lie, I wasn't a huge fan of the new L. It just felt weird. They went with the decision to kill off L, who was an amazing protagonist, and the story should have really ended at that point with either L or Light dying, and simply replacing L with another one just felt a little weak. I did really like him here though. He was a lot more like the L we knew, and was just overall more interesting. Ryuk goes on the news once again, holding a paper saying that America has won the power of Kira for $10 trillion. So, needless to say, my bid didn't work. Then we are told the funds need to be deposited in equal amounts to every person with a Yotsuba bank account under the age of 60. This meant every person was going to receive 1 billion yen. This was beyond genius. The plan was foolproof. It had no glaring hole in it. L knew he had no way to find who the new Akira was and admitted defeat. So Tanaka told Ryuk to take the book to Trump and mentioned once he gives up the book, he will lose all memories of what happened and never wants to see Ryuk again for any reason. Ryuk shows up in front of Trump, who is basically pissing himself in fear, and Ryuk mentioned he got yelled at from the Shinigami King before seeing Trump and was told he was not allowed to sell the Death Note in the human world, so they added a new rule. The rule states a human who buys or sells the Death Note in the human world will die. The seller will die when they receive the money, and the buyer will die when they receive the Death Note. So Ryuk mentions Trump spent all that money just to die, but he has 2 options. If he accepts the book, he dies, but the book remains in the US, therefore the American government will keep the book. Or he doesn't accept the book, and Ryuk takes it back with him, and Trump lives. Though in both scenarios, the US loses the $10 trillion. So naturally Trump doesn't keep the book, that way he can live, and Ryuk mentions that Trump values his own life over his country's. Trump also says he will simply lie and tell the people he got the book, but will never use it so his people think he's a saint. Remember how Ryuk mentioned the new rule and how when the seller receives the money, they will die as well? So Ryuk contemplated if he should warn Tanaka, But since Tanaka said, "Don't ever show up around me ever again for any reason," Ryuk decided to listen. So a month goes by and Tanaka is getting the money from his account, and then he dies on the spot. Everything was unfolding perfectly for Tanaka, but because the Shinigamis introduced a new rule at the very last second and didn't warn Tanaka, he ultimately died, and it was all Ryuk's fault. This is pretty interesting because it shows the Shinigamis can make rules whenever they want and don't have to tell you about the changes. In the end, your life is completely in their hands, and they simply look at humans like insects to play around with. Despite his death, his plan still ultimately worked, and all of those people still got to keep the money, and the US still lost $10 trillion. So economically, this will have a huge impact. Overall, I really enjoyed this, and it was great to get some new Death Note content after so many years. I hope you enjoyed that little intro I made. You will definitely be seeing stuff like that from time to time, so let me know in the comments if you enjoyed that, and if you haven't yet, consider liking the video and subscribing. It really helps me out. And consider sharing the video around too, if you want. That's it for this one though, and I will see you in the next video.